Hello and welcome. Any project is about getting certain tasks done. Now, what needs to be done requires to be established before we can start the project. It is a good idea to know what are we out to do and then we can start performing them in an optimal manner. The first step in project planning is to create the work breakdown structure which gives a clear idea regarding what are the tasks that we have to perform. In this video, we will discuss how we can create the work breakdown structure. To create the work breakdown structure, we need to have a strategy. Now, the strategy basically is an approach we need to take to create the work breakdown structure. According to PMP, there are only two approaches to creating a work breakdown structure. One approach is known as the top-down approach, top down approach, and another approach is the bottom up approach. So we have basically two strategies which PMP tells us. And actually this is the fact. We do not have any other way to get this thing done. However, I will discuss with you another way which can make this simple. Ultimately, you may notice that it will boil down to either top-down approach or bottom-up approach. But nevertheless, this can make the task easy. I have found that this technique works well for me, so I'm proposing this to you. Before we can go to that technique, let us discuss what is top-down approach and what is bottom-up approach. Uh, in the top-down approach, we start from the top of the project, that is what is the main task which we have to get done, and we break down the task into smaller components as we keep decomposing the task into smaller and smaller components and move downwards. So we move from the top to the down and ultimately we come to the units of tasks which can be no longer broken into further components. So that is a top-down approach. In the bottom-up approach, we collect all the tasks which are our anticipation that we have to perform, and then we collate them and group them into several groups and keep moving upwards. So this is what is the bottom-up approach, where we have a clear idea regarding what are the tasks which we have to perform, and then we move upwards, grouping them into suitable groups. In most projects which I have performed, I have used a top-down approach because that makes logical sense. But there are projects which require bottom-up approach where we have more clarity regarding what are the tasks we performed at the ground level, and then we move upwards. Now the technique which I'm proposing is known as the process-based approach. Now this is the approach which we can take before we get down to either top-down approach or bottom-up approach. We will discuss how this can be applied. Let us understand the technique for applying process-based approach to creating the work breakdown structure. Now we will do that through an example. So here I have given you one work breakdown structure which is for creating a new library IT system. This is the implementation project. So now in the process-based approach, we know that in any project we have to conduct certain processes, like we have to initiate the project, we have to plan the project, we have to execute the project, and then ultimately we have to monitor and close the project. So monitoring is an ongoing process, and we have to do this task of initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, and closing. So we can plant this as the first level of tasks in any project. This, I believe, every project should have this. There are projects which do not have this as well, but in some form or the other, they should be there. Like for example, if it's a manpower outsourcing project, where manpower augmentation project, you may not have too much amount of work to do in planning. You may not have too much amount of work to do in closing. It can be a 1-year contract and you have a set of tasks which you must be performing. Maybe it's even not a project, maybe it's an operation. Nevertheless, still there will be a process of initiating. We have to sign the contract, then you have to do a planning, how to get the people, etc. So every project, I believe, has these processes where we have to initiate, where we have to plan, we have to execute the project, we have to monitor, and then we have to close the project. So this can be our first level of tasks. And under each process, we can then have various tasks. Now, in certain processes, like the initiation process, we can have some set of tasks. For example, while initiating, we have to kick off the project, then we have to sign the project charter, and we have to identify the project manager, we have to identify the team, etc. All these activities have to be done, and then we may have, in this particular case, we may have to identify the hardware and software in this particular project that we are discussing. This team felt that this is the activity which they can do at the initiation stage. Then we come to the planning. In the planning, we can have certain tasks which are fixed. For example, we may have to identify the team. Like I told you, in a in augmentation project, we may have to identify a vendor who will give the people, or we may have to have a strategy how we will onboard the people by recruitment, etc. Then we have to get a budget approval. Then we have to create the project plan. We have to make the project schedule, and then we may have other tasks which we may have to do. Now these can be also fixed. Now you are noticing that ultimately, after having identified the top level processes, we are going by some kind of a top down approach or a bottom up approach. Maybe I could have known that these are the tasks I have performed, and I'm collating them under this group heading called planning. Or I may have identified that I have to plan the project, and I'm breaking down from the top, telling that I have to do these activities which I have to perform as a part of the project. Generally, in the execution part, we always come down to the fact that we may use top-down approach if it's a product development or a process upgrade, etc. And it can be a bottom-up approach if it's like a resource augmentation project. Now here, we identify that we have to execute the project, and then we break down the tasks into certain granularity till we can no longer break it down any further. So under this, we will have a lot of tasks. Generally, this will be a very big area. We can put the basic ideas here, which can be utilized for the monitoring purposes, and then we can progress further. In monitoring, we will normally have a set of tasks which is predefined. We will normally have a review process and a preventive maintenance cycle, and we will have a tracking cycle and control process, etc. We can group them under this monitoring head. Then we will have certain tasks to be done in the closing. We may have to collect the lessons learned, and we may have to collect the artifacts and archive them, and etc. and ultimately close the project. So these are the tasks which we will have on the closing process. Now you notice that we have broken down the project into subtasks which are grouped in certain way, and they are forming a logical structure. This logical structure that we have created, this is the work breakdown structure. Now, this is a picture which gives a clear idea regarding what we have to do. But however, we may have to plant it onto a project management tool like Project MPP file needs to be created in Microsoft Project or Primavera, where we can put the tasks what we have to perform and group them together under certain heads, and this can be utilized for the purpose of managing the project. Once we have the work breakdown structure, the next step is to estimate and plan the project. What do we mean by this? What we mean is that we have identified the task. I have taken a simplified project where we have 12 tasks, and these do not have any subtasks, so I have just put them on a linear structure like this. Now, so these are our tasks: task A, task B, task C, etc. Now these tasks can be like making a project plan, or buying the hardware, or doing the software development, testing, etc. These are the tasks. They will have some description. Normally you will have that in your project plan. Now every task, we have to estimate how much amount of time it will take to complete the task. That is known as the duration. So like for example, in my case, I have said that A will take 7 units of time. The unit of time can be anything. It can be weeks, it can be months, it can be days, it can be years. Some projects are very large, which can take years for a particular task to complete. For example, building a stadium can be one such project. Now, once we have identified, or once we have estimated the durations, what we will take for every task, and we have made a estimation for the same, there will be some basis for estimation. There are the techniques which is out of the scope of this discussion right now. Anyway, after the estimations have been done, then we can make an initial plan. That is, I can plan that I can do task B only after I have finished task A. So I need to make a plan that this task has a dependency. The B task has a dependency on task A, that I cannot start task B till task A is completed. There are various kinds of dependencies. We will discuss that later. However, we have to plan these dependencies. These dependencies are known as the predecessors. That is, which task has to be performed in which manner according to a logic. So, for example, you notice that the task D in my plan cannot begin till task B and C have been completed. So, we have to make this plan. So, once we have this plan, we will have our basic ground based on which we can go ahead and plan our project or schedule our